Asmat Gurubhyo Namaha, Asmat Parama Gurubhyo Namaha, Asmat Sarva Gurubhyo Namaha. So welcome to Vaishnavism. We're talking about the historical development of Vaishnavism, and we have been discussing the Vaishnavism in the Vedas, in the Shruti, and now we're going to start to discuss where Vaishnavism is mentioned in the other scriptures, which are not Shruti, which are not Vedas. So we're going to start with the Agamas. So let's have a look at the main text, right? Vaishnavism in the Agamas. In the post-Vedic period, a fuller development of the important tenets of Vaishnavism can be found in the Agamas, a body of religious treatises devoted primarily to the modes of the worship of God. The term Agama generally means sacred texts and refers in particular to the revealed scripture, Nigama. Okay, Nigama usually means Shruti, but anyway, but Agama, as applied to the religious literature under our consideration, means that which came later than the Vedas. The word gam, which means to go in Sanskrit, right, with the preposition implies to move towards an object to be gained. The Agama is also known as Tantra, or the system that elaborates the knowledge acquired from the Vedas. Tan means to spread, and Tra means to save the aspirant from fear of bondage, Trayate, to cross over. So it is also designated as Samhita, or the composition. The dates of the Agamas are disputed among the modern scholars, varying from about 3000 BC, or BC, which would be like the traditional date, to about 800 AD. And that quotation there is from a very common work on the Agamas called Introduction to Pancharatra Agama and the Introduction to the Pancharatra and Arhibudnya Samhita by Otto Schrader. Very famous book. Okay, so, but according to tradition, the main source of the Vaishnava doctrines contained in the Agamas is the Vedas. So we've already seen the sources from the Vedas in our previous discussion. The Mahabharata, in which we have the earliest and clear presentation of the essential teachings of the Pancharatra Agamas, states that Lord Narayana is the promulgator of the Pancharatra system. And this is a quotation from Mahabharata 12:359-68. Pancharatrasya Krishnasya Vakta Narayana Swayam. That's a very good quotation. I'm not sure if we quoted this before, perhaps in our discussion of Agamas and South Indian Vaishnavism, we quoted that. Okay, so that's a good pramana. So it also makes a reference to the Pancharatra Agama, right? According to the Vedanta Sutra, whose author is the same Vyasa that composed the Mahabharata, according to the tradition, the two authors are identical. See Rahasya Traya Sara, Guru Parampara, and Guru Parampara Sara, page 70. So makes a reference to the Pancharatra system. So in the Rahasya Traya Sara of Vedanta Deshika and Guru Parampara Sara also, there are these references to the Pancharatra system. We should therefore accord to the Agamas a period which is later than the Vedas, but earlier than the Itihasas or the Mahabharata. There are several types of Agamas. Okay, so in brief, of these, the Vaishnava, Shaiva, and Shakta Agamas are considered the most important, but we do have Bodh Agamas and Jain Agamas for Buddhists and Jains, but we're not interested too much in that. But the three main Agamas that we can understand are Vaishnava Agamas, Shaiva Agamas, and Shakta Agamas, which talk about those different deities. The Vaishnava Agamas uphold the exclusive worship of Vishnu as the supreme deity. Shaiva Agamas emphasize the worship of Shiva as the supreme deity. And Shakta Agamas regard Shakti, or a female energy known by the names of goddess Devi, Durga, Kali, etc., as the supreme deity. We are primarily concerned here with the Vaishnava agamas, which constitute the main source for the latter development of Vaishnavism. The concept of Vishnu as a supreme deity as found in the Rig Veda, remember we discussed all the quotes in the Rig Veda, especially the Purusha Suktam, right, was developed in a cult in the Vaishnava agamas, emphasizing the exclusive worship of Vishnu as a means to salvation or liberation. Realizing the need of offering worship to one deity in a concrete form, these agamas have evolved the concept of worshiping it in an image form or archa, like the murti, the three-dimensional, physical form. As a follow-up of this form of worship, the consecration of icons, the construction of temples for this purpose, and the observance of certain prescribed daily rituals and other festivals in the temples have all been formulated in the agamas. All these have influenced the development of Vaishnavism. The Vaishnava agamas fall into two categories, the Vaikhanasa and the Pancharatra. The former, which is older in origin, is based on the Vaikhanasa Kalpa Sutras compiled by the Vedic sage Vikanas, and claims to have been that it has taken its teachings directly from the Vedas. The Vaikhanasa system was expounded by the four disciples of Vikanas, right? Marichi, Brigu, Atri, and Kashyapa, who are claimed to be disciples of Vikanas. On the authority of the hymn of the Rig Veda, that is now these quotations here that we have some quotations here like 80. Let's have a look back here. 85. Right. Okay. 86. We have some footnotes. So 85. Vedanta Sutra 2, 39 and 40, according to Ramanuja Bhasya, and 42 and 43, according to Shankara Bhasya. Both Shankara and Ramanuja are agreed that these sutras refer to the theory of the Pancharatra system. Of course, Shankara doesn't like the Pancharatra system; he doesn't accept it, but Ramanuja does. So, therefore, in the Pancharatra is also mentioned in the Vedanta Sutras. Right, now coming to the Vaikhanasa Agama, we have this footnote about coming from the Vimana Archana Kalpa. So anybody who's watched the series of lectures or discussions that we have on Agamas in South Indian Vaishnavism will know that we've discussed Vaikhanasa Agama to a great extent there, and you can go look at it there on that video. And this Vimana Archana Kalpa is one of the main texts for Vaikhanasa Agama. So, all of these have influenced the development of Vaishnavism. So there's Vaikhanasa and Pancharatra, and down here we have the Vaikhanasa system was expounded by these four sages, right? Marichi, Brigu, Atri, and Kashyapa, who were disciples of Vikanas, on the authority of the hymn of the Rig Veda. That hymn of the Rig Veda is Rig Veda 1, 155.1. Prava Panta Mandasho Dhyayate Mahe Suryaya Vishnave Charchata. That's the hymn. That's the hymn that gives this authority. On the authority of that hymn in the Rig Veda, referring to the worship of Vishnu, it advocates that the Brahmins should perform the archana of Vishnu daily. It should be done daily. And that is also explained in the Vimana Archana Kalpa, which is the Vaikhanasa text, page 503. Tasmat Vishnu Archanam Eva Dvijahi Aharaha means every day, right? Kartavyam iti vijnayate. So we should know that one should worship the Lord Vishnu every day. Shonaka, the author of Kalpa Sutra, also, so there's a Shonaka Kalpa Sutra, right? Also quotes the same Rik mantra in support of daily worship of Vishnu. We also need to see Vedanta Deshika's commentary on Stotra Ratna, page 41, for more information about this. Okay, so now Vishnu in this system is identified with Narayana, the very Brahman on the authority of the Taittiriya Narayana Upanishad, which we mentioned before in our discussion of Agamas. And also we mentioned it before in the previous lecture about parts of the Vedas which talk about Vishnu. So this text here is tasya bhavaha tattvamiti tasya parabrahmanaha narayanasya bhavaha tattvam narayana para iti shrutihi. So in the Shruti, it's known that Narayana is the supreme tattva, is the supreme principle, is what is being said here. And that's from Vedanta Deshika's commentary on Stotra Ratna, which is a prayer by Yamunacharya. Okay, so then this sets aside the doubt whether Vishnu referred to in the Rig Veda is Narayana of the Brahman of the Upanishads, right? So if anybody was in any doubt, they can put that aside. The Pancharatra Agamas are based on the Ekayana recension of the Shukla Yajurveda, which is not extant. And thus, these two are of Vedic origin. Okay, so normally when we talk about the Ekayana Shaka, we're talking about when the four Vedas, or there are four Vedas, Rig, Yajus, Sama, and Atharvan. Sometimes we say three Vedas, Rig, Yajus, and Sama, are the most important ones. When they were all together and before Vedavyasa divided them into four, right, they were called the Ekayana Shaka, or the Ekayana branch or recension. Now here he's saying even further that recension was originally a Shukla Yajurveda recension. Now the difference between Shukla Yajurveda and Krishna Yajurveda is that in the Krishna Yajurveda, the Brahmana section and the Upanishad section, the Brahmana section and the Samhita section, right? The Samhita is the hymns, the Brahmana is the Brahmana usually is giving us directions to use the hymns, right, in different sacrifices, are separate. They're separate in the Shukla Yajurveda, but they're mixed in the Krishna Yajurveda. So in the Krishna Yajurveda, that's why it's called the Black Yajurveda. It's really a mixed Yajurveda and the pure Yajurveda, the unmixed one, right? So Shukla Yajurveda in the Ekayana Shaka, that was considered to be the origin of the Vedas. So the term Pancharatra is explained in different ways, but one plausible interpretation is provided by Vedanta Deshika. And again, PR, I don't know what this is, but PR, it says here, it gives a quotation here, Panchakala, Vyavashtitai Tityai, Venkatesha, Vipaschita, Sri Pancharatra Siddhanta, Vyavasteyam, Samarhita. Okay, so that's an explanation by Vedanta Deshika, is that it teaches the fivefold daily religious duties of a Vaishnava. That is, Abhigamana, Upadani, Swadhyaya, and Yoga. Okay, so for an explanation of these terms, we'll get later on. Later on, we'll explain these terms in detail. But basically, Abhigamana these are 5 stages of the Vaishnava's day, that he gets up and he gets ready and performs his ablutions and gets ready for doing worship. Upadana is collecting the ingredients used for worship. Ija is the actual process of performing the worship of the icon of the deity, right? Swadhyaya is the study of the scriptures, and yoga is meditation and taking rest at night. Okay, so the Arya-Bunya Samhita, which is a very important Samhita, explains the name as also being derived from the concept of the fivefold manifestation of the Supreme Being as Para, Vyuha, Vibhava, Antaryami, and Archa, right? So these are, Para is the original personality of Godhead, Vyuha is expansions into Vasudeva, Sankarsana, Pradyumna, Aniruddha. Vibhava are the different Leela avatars and different avatars that manifest at different times in this world, different descents of the Lord and expansions. Right, Archa are the deities in the temple, and Antaryaman is the super soul or the Paramatman that resides within everybody's hearts. So these are also the 5 forms of God. So when somebody asks you what Pancharatra means, okay, it can be the Pancha in Pancharatra can be the 5 sections of the day of the Vaishnava day. It can also be the 5 forms of God, etc. There's many different meanings to the word Pancharatra. The names which are generally used for Vishnu in these agamas are Bhagavan and Vasudeva. So thus, a very important mantra is the Dwadasakshara mantra, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. It's a very, very important mantra in the agamas. Okay. These names including that of Narayana, are identical, right? So Narayana, Vishnu, Vasudeva, these are all considered synonymous, the same personality, Lord Vishnu, Sriman Narayana. The Arya-Bhujna Samhita has offered a detailed etymological interpretation of these terms. So we have from the Arya-Bhujna Samhita 52:34 to 70, and from the Lakshmi Tantra 2, 5 and 6, we have this verse. Sa Vasudevo Bhagavan Chetra Gya Paramo Mataha Vishnu Narayano Vishvarupa Yatiryate. Okay. So, and if we take these into consideration, it's obvious that all the names represent the Supreme Being, the very Brahman of the Upanishads. Some ancient as well as modern scholars have taken the view that Pancharatra is non-Vedic in origin and hence not authoritative. The validity of the Pancharatra system has been vindicated by Yamunacharya in his Agama Pramanya, by Ramanuja in his commentary on the relevant Vedanta sutras in Sribhasya, and in a more emphatic way by Vedanta Deshika in another book called Pancharatra Raksha. So if we have any doubt about the authenticity and originality and acceptableness of the Pancharatra system, we can look at these books, and these books will help us to prove that. The Mahabharata extols it as authoritative because it is taught by Lord Narayana. The Pancharatra Samhitas claim their origin from the Vedas. So in the Markandeya Samhita, which is a Pancharatra Agama, it mentions, Shruti Mulamidam Shastram Pramanam Kalpasutravat, right? And in the Vishnu Tantra 136, it says, Shruti Mulani Tanyeva Pancharatrani Pankaja. Okay? So there, and we can also see in the Lakshmi Tantra that's also mentioned. Right. So it is therefore definitely pro-Vedic, right? Definitely pro-Vedic. Sankara, in his commentary on the disputed Vedanta Sutra regarding the validity of Pancharatra, questions only some of the philosophical theories which apparently appear to contradict Vedic teachings, such as the origin of the jiva. But he has not openly disputed the essential teachings of the Pancharatra theology. Okay, so there's this idea in the Pancharatra, which Shankara actually gets wrong. He thinks that Sankarshana is supposed to be the expansion of the Lord, which has to do with the jivas. And he says that the Pancharatra say that Sankarshana is the origin of the jivas, of the individual souls. Whereas we know that in Vedanta philosophy, the idea is the souls are eternal, although they're created by God initially, but they come into being outside of time, so they're considered eternal, like that. So therefore, if the Pancharatra says that they're created by Sankarshana, right, that's what Shankara is saying is wrong. That's why he rejects the Pancharatra, because there are some teachings that appear to be in conflict with Vedanta philosophy in the Pancharatra. But in fact, they're not in conflict. It's just a misinterpretation by Shankara. But he has not openly disputed the essential teachings of the Pancharatra theology. Okay. In fact, in Shankara's Gita Bhashya, he says, Narayana Pravyaktat, Narayana is supreme. So he accepts Narayana as supreme. But he's a little bit leery about the Pancharatra school, because of a few things that are said in the Pancharatra. In fact, Shankara holds very in high esteem the Bhagavatas, right? The four vyuhas, means the Vaishnava devotees, the four vyuhas, the four expansions Lord Vishnu, the concept of Vasudeva as the supreme deity, and the fivefold religious practice of the Bhagavatas, right, which was Abhigamana, Upadana, Ija, Svadhyaya, and Yoga, right? So the fivefold practice, and for that we can see Shankara Bhashya 2.2.42 on the Vedanta Sutra. So he actually accepts that. So it's not true to say that Shankara totally dismisses the Pancharatra Samhitas or the Pancharatra Agama school. So the Pancharatra Samhitas are treatises are far too many. The Samhitas themselves enumerate themselves, and the number varies from 108 to about 154. So Dr. Otto Schrader has listed about 210 Pancharatra Samhitas, and Pandit V. Krishnamacharya has mentioned 225. Right. So in his in the introduction to Lakshmi Tantra, this V. Krishnamacharya in the Adyar edition on pages 10 to 13, he's mentioned that there are up to 225 different Pancharatra Samhitas. So there's a lot of them. Right. They have been written at different periods. A few are more ancient, while many others are of late origin. The most ancient and authoritative Vaishnava Agamas are the Satvada, Paushkara, and Jayakya, claiming their source to the divine teachings. So these are called Divya Samhitas. So in the Pancharatra Agama, there's different Samhitas, and some of them are divinely, they're spoken by the Supreme Lord, Srimad Narayana, and others are spoken by different rishis or munis. So, and others are spoken by different devatas. So, right, based on these, we have Ishvara, Parameshwara, and Padma, right? So these are actually, anybody who's interested in Pancharatra, they should know that the Satvada, Paushkara, and Jayakya are called the three gems of the Pancharatra. And there are three big temples in South India, the temples in Melkote, in Srirangam, and in Kanchipuram, which follow these three gems of the Pancharatra, right? And also the commentaries, there are three other Samhitas, which are written by sages, which are considered commentaries on these three gems of the Pancharatra, right? So there's Ishvara, Parameshwara, and Padma. These are the commentaries. These are considered to be commentaries on the other ones, on Satvada, Paushkara, and Jayakya. So, which are being contributed by sages. So they're not called Divya, they're called Muni Bhashita. They're spoken by great rishis. Two other agamas from which material has been drawn exclusively by Vaishnavacharyas for expounding on the doctrines of Avatara, the goddess Shri or Lakshmi, and Prapati, the system of surrender unto God, which is there in the Ramanuja Sampradaya, especially, are the Arhibudnya Samhita and the Lakshmi Tantra. So right now we have these very important Satvada, Paushkara, Jayakya with their commentaries Ishvara, Parameshwara, and Padma, plus adding to them Arhibudnya and Lakshmi Tantra. So the other important topics that have been adopted by Vaishnavism from the Pancharatra texts are the six principal attributes of God, or Sadguna, right? Jnana, Yoga, Jnana, Bala, Aishwarya, Virya, Tejas, Shakti. I'm missing one. Bala, maybe. Bala and Shakti. Okay, so the mode of worship of God in the icon in the temples as well as in the homes, the fivefold daily observances, Panchakala Prakriya, which we mentioned, right, which is the Abhigamana, Upadana, Ija, Svadhyaya, and Yoga, right? The theory of Nitya Vibhuti, which means the idea of a divine abode, and Paramapada, right, which is mentioned even in the Vedas, right? So that's also there in the Pancharatras. And the concept of Bhagavata. Bhagavata means a Vaishnava who is a worshipper of Lord Vishnu. In general, the theological aspect of Vaishnavism has been greatly influenced by the Pancharatra system. On the philosophical side, the influence of the Agamas has not been so great. So even though the agamas are divided up, all agama samhitas are usually divided into 4 sections, starting with jnana and yoga, right? Knowledge of existence and knowledge of the how the internal in the body, the system of Kundalini yoga relates to the system of the cosmos, right, which is called yoga, right? So those parts have less influence on Vaishnavism than the other parts, which are Kriya and Charya, which is the establishment of temples and deities and the daily and occasional worship of them. So on the philosophical side, the influence of the arguments has not been so great. The philosophical theories relating to the doctrines of Ishvara, means the supreme person, right? Jiva, the individual soul, Prakriti or material nature, their organic relationship, right? Which is understood by Ramanuja as the relationship between the body and the soul, Shariri Bhava, right? So that's why he says organic relationship. The means, the upaya, the means to liberation and the goal of liberation, right? So again, we have here tattva, hita, and purushartha. The tattva is the tattva of Ishvara, the tattva of Jiva, the tattva of Prakriti, the truth about all these things, these principles, the principle of their organic relationship between these first 3 things, Ishvara, Jiva, and Prakriti, which are called Chidachid Ishvara, right? Chid is the Jiva, Achid is Prakriti, and Ishvara is God, right? And their organic relationship. Then the means to liberation is called upaya, which is also in that system of tattva, hita, and purushartha is called hita, right? And purushartha means the goal or moksha, right? Or liberation. Are all taken directly from Upanishadic teachings, right? So the philosophical understandings of all of these things given in the Pancharatras are all taken from Upanishadic teachings. We can bring out the extent of the influence of the agamas on Vaishnavism when we discuss these doctrines in the respective chapters. So this is going to come later. So this is just a synopsis of what comes in the Pancharatra Agama. We also talked about a synopsis of what's in the Vaikhanasa Agama. Vaishnavism now in the Itihasas, in the Ramayana and Mahabharata. After the Agamas, the development of the essential tenets of Vaishnava philosophy and religion has taken place in a comprehensive way in the 2 Itihasas or epics, the Ramayana and Mahabharata. The Mahabharata also includes the Bhagavad-Gita, right, which is one of the Prasthana Traya, the 3 Prasthanas, the 3 basic texts of Vedanta. It also includes the 1,000 Names of Vishnu, which is also a very important text. And this is also considered philosophical text. Has many commentaries on it. The Ramayana is the older epic, since we have references to Rama's avatar in the Mahabharata, right? So between the 2, the Ramayana and Mahabharata, since we know about Rama's avatar in the Mahabharata, but we don't hear about Krishna's avatar in the Ramayana is the older epic. And in fact, if you go throughout Southeast Asia, you'll see that the Hindu diaspora, when Hinduism spread across Asia, there are many more references to Ramayana and to the exploits of Lord Rama than there are to Lord Krishna. For instance, if you go to Indonesia and Bali, you'll find a lot of references to things in the Ramayana, very few in Mahabharata. Okay. So the Ramayana is the older epic since we have references to Rama's avatar in the Mahabharata. It is regarded as by the Vaishnava acharyas as a Sharanagati Shastra. That means it has to do with surrender to the Lord, because so many people are surrendering to the Lord, and there are so many different types of surrender explained in the Ramayana. A text expounding the doctrine of self-surrender. The episode of Vibhishana, the brother of Ravana, who deserts his kingdom, family and wealth, and seeks the refuge of Sri Rama, is a classic illustration of Sharanagati. It's also regarded as a text expounding the greatness of the goddess Lakshmi through the character of Sita, who is an incarnation of the goddess. Valmiki himself states that Ramayana is essentially a portrayal of Sita's character. Right, so this comes from Valmiki Ramayana. 147. Kavyam Ramayanam Kritsnam Sitaya Charitam Mahat. So even the author of Ramayana, Valmiki, is basically saying that the Ramayana is not really Ramayana, it's really Sitayana. It's really about Sita. It's all about Sita, her character. The Ramayana depicts that the very Lord Vishnu incarnated himself in the form of a human being as the son of the emperor Dasarata, extolling the significance of avatara, or descent. Lakshmana and Bharata are presented as a personification of two important Vaishnava concepts, that is, dasatva, right? We can also say sheshatva, but dasatva, or service to Bhagavan, service to the Lord, right? As the sole purpose of an individual soul, and Bhagavad Bhakti, or worship of God with devotion. Shatrugna, right, who's the other brother, right? Rama has three brothers, Lakshmana and Bharata, and Shatrugna. Shatrugna symbolizes Bhagavata Kainkarya, or service to God's devotee, who is considered to be of greater spiritual value than Bhagavat Kainkarya, or service to God. So we have Lakshmana representing the service to God, direct service to God, right? As the sole purpose of an individual, right? And Bharata representing worship of God with devotion, right? Right? Because even in the absence of God, so Bharata is worshiping Lord Rama by ruling the kingdom in his absence, right? And then we have this Bhagavata Kainkarya, which is symbolized by Shatrugna, the other brother. He represents the service of the devotee of God, right? The Vaishnavacharyas, including Ramanuja, have freely drawn material from the Ramayana in developing the theological doctrines of Vaishnavism. Next in importance comes the Mahabharata, right? So we're talking about the Ramayana. Now we're talking about the Mahabharata, which is almost the encyclopedia of Vaishnava philosophy and religion, though it deals with many other topics relating to social and ethical values, and also other religions such as Shaivism. It lays greater emphasis on the various doctrines of Vaishnavism. It is regarded as the fifth Veda, or Panchama Veda. So this is a quotation here from Tattvamukta Kalapa 3.2, which is a book by Vedanta Deshika. It means philosophical garland of pearls, or pearl necklace of philosophical doctrines, right? Adyam Ramayadam Tatsa Cha Nigama Gane Panchamaha. Right. And also, in another text, it mentions that the Mahabharata is considered to be the fifth Veda. Vedan Adhyayapayam Asa Mahabharata Panchaman. Iti. Okay. So we can also see Mahabharata 12, 327, 18 on that point. Right. So now, the doctrines of the Pancharatra are found recorded for the first time in the Narayaniya section of the Shanti Parva. Mahabharata is divided up into different sections called Parvas, like cantos of the Mahabharata. The identity of Vishnu with Vasudeva, Narayana, and Bhagavan, as well as with Krishna, is established in the Mahabharata. The devoted worship of Vishnu or Vasudeva as the sole means of moksha is brought out emphatically in this Itihasa. The Moksha Dharma section of Shanti Parva is devoted to the presentation of the philosophy and religion of Vaishnavism. The Bhagavad-Gita, which forms part of the Mahabharata, is the most important source book, and in fact, it constitutes the foundation for the exposition of the sadhana for moksha, right? Because actually we have, in the Bhagavad-Gita, we have different sadhanas being prescribed by Lord Krishna: Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, and ultimately Prapatti or Sharanagati in the Krishna Charma Sloka, which is verse 1866 of Bhagavad Gita. For the first time, we find in this work a detailed account of Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, and briefly Sharanagati. briefly in the Gita, because there's only that one verse. Actually, we could make an argument that Sharanagati is also seen in some other places in the Gita, but we'll leave that for another time. Ramanuja, in his introduction to the Gita, says that the Lord, under the pretext of teaching to Arjuna, imparted to us all bhakti yogam avatarayam masa. Sometimes the exposition of Vasudeva as the supreme deity, besides the exposition of Vasudeva as the supreme deity, it offers a detailed account of Vaishnavism. The Sahasranama Vishnu, the 1,000 names of Vishnu, narrated by Bhishma in the Anushasana Parva, provide a deeper insight into the greatness of Vishnu and his numerous attributes. The supremacy of Vishnu, as against all other deities, including Shiva and Brahma, is upheld throughout the Mahabharata. It is therefore no wonder that Ramanuja and his followers have drawn material extensively from the Mahabharata in not only expounding the Vaishnava doctrines, but also used it as an unquestionable evidence or pramana to support their teachings. Okay, so now we come to Vaishnavism in the Puranas. The contribution of the Puranas in general, and the Vishnu Purana of sage Parashara in particular, is significant in developing Vaishnava doctrines. The Vishnu Purana is acknowledged as the oldest and most authoritative Purana, and that is because out of the 18 Mahapuranas, there are some other Upa-Puranas or small Puranas, but the great Puranas are 18 in number, and they're divided up into Sattvic, Rajasic, and Tamasic, or those in the mode of goodness, passion, and ignorance. Out of the Sattvic Vaishnava Puranas, we have five of them which are compiled by Vedavyas, and another one, Vishnu Purana, which is actually compiled by the father of Vyasa, Parashara. So the Vishnu Purana is compiled by Parashara, so it's considered to be older and more authoritative. Both Shankara and Ramanuja hold it in high esteem and have accepted it as an authentic source book for determining philosophical doctrines. So if we look in VS, I'm not sure what VS is, like that. Okay, so that there's a quotation that explains that. It presents all the basic doctrines, both philosophical and theological, of Vaishnavism. This is the earlier text which treats Godhead against the background of the Pancharatra system. It's the earliest text that we find, which treats Godhead against the background of the Pancharatra system. Right? The Vishnu Purana. So Vishnu is held as a supreme deity, Paratattva, and is identified with the very Brahman of the Upanishads. At the very outset, the Purana asserts that Vishnu is the primary cause of creation, sustenance, and dissolution of the universe, reiterating the definition offered by the Taittiriya Upanishad and the Vedanta Sutra for Brahman, which was, so we can look at Vishnu Purana 5.18.58 for that quote. The same Vishnu is also spoken of as Bhagavan in Vasudeva. And for that, we have to look at Vishnu Purana 6.5, 76, 78, and 80. He possesses 6 attributes or sadgunas, right? And is also free from all defects. The concept of Ubhaya Lingatva, as stated in the Vedanta Sutra, is thus explicitly brought out in this Purana. Ubhaya Lingatva. Okay, Ubhaya Linga usually means gender. So Ubhaya Linga means having both genders. Okay, not sure exactly what that's trying to say. Right, the central. So, but if we want to look for that in more detail, we have to go to Vishnu Purana 122.53, 6.5, 79, and 85. Okay. The central doctrine of Vaishnavism, that is that Vishnu is inseparably associated with goddess Shri, and that, oh, I see this. Okay, so we just have to remember that SMS Chari is a Vadagalai Shri Vaishnava. So he's explaining this part of Vishnu Purana, this quote from Vishnu Purana, which basically talks about the supreme couple, Lakshmi Narayana, right? The central doctrine of Vaishnavism, that Vishnu is inseparably associated with the goddess Shri, his eternal consort, that the latter is also all-pervasive or vibhu, like God, which is not accepted by all Sri Vaishnavas. The Tengalis don't accept that she's also vibhu. Vibhu meaning all-expansive. Actually, the Tengalaya Acharyas, the southern Acharyas of Sri Vaishnavism, do accept that she's vibhu, but only in a certain way, that she has guna vyapti and not swarupa vyapti, okay, which we can explain some other time. But she is all expansive, but only in a certain way, because she's always with the Supreme Lord, right? And that she is also the giver of moksha, right? Finds a significant expression here. So he quotes from Vishnu Purana 1:8, 17, 1:9, 1:20, and 1:9, 1:26. These will all be the Vadagalaya Acharya's quotes from Vishnu Purana to say how Lakshmi can also give liberation, like that. So there's a slight difference of opinion in the two schools of Sri Vaishnavism over this, like that. But anyway, here he's giving it as definitive and giving the quotations. So if we want to go and look up the quotations and see what they actually say, we can. The Vaishnava concept of Paramapada, the eternal abode of Vishnu, is also referred to in this Purana. And for that, we need to look at Vishnu Purana 1:9, 51 and 55 and 2:2, 105. The other Puranas, so leaving aside all of this from Vishnu Purana, right? The other Puranas are classified into three categories: Sattvika, Rajasika, Rajasa, and Tamasa. Okay, so he's saying the other Puranas, but I would say that all 18, including Vishnu Purana, are classified into these three. The Sattvika, Vishnu Purana is one of the Sattvika Puranas. The Sattvika Puranas are those which emphasize the greatness of Vishnu. The Rajasa speak of about Brahma, and the Tamasa refer to Shiva and Agni, the greatness of Shiva and Agni. This classification is made in the Matsya Purana for purpose of determining the relative validity of the Puranas. Okay, so in terms of pramanas or scriptural references, and to see which are higher scriptural references and which are lower subsidiary scriptural references, we have to know which is higher than the other, or more authoritative, let's say. Like that. So for purpose of determining the relative validity of the Puranas, whenever conflict arises between their teachings, the Sattvik Puranas are therefore regarded as Vaishnava Puranas. These are Vishuddhamotara, Padma, Garuda, Varaha, Naradiya, Bhagavata, besides the Vishnu Purana. So these are the six Sattvika Puranas. So Vishnu Purana, Bhagavad Purana, Naradiya Purana, Varaha Purana, Garuda Purana, Padma Purana, and Vishuddhamotara. All these therefore contain material supporting the tenets of Vaishnavism. Now, the next thing is what we find Vaishnavism in any vernacular literature. So we have the vernacular Tamil hymns of the Alvars. The 12 Alvars, or great Vaishnava saints, have written 4,000 verses, in praise of Lord Vishnu. The 4,000 Tamil hymns composed by the 12 saints known as Alvars marks an important stage in the development of Vaishnavism. The Alvars were born in different parts of southern India long before Ramanuja. The traditional date ascribed to the earliest Alvar is 4,203 BCE. And the date of the latest Alvar, right? So that would be, the first Alvar would be Pogai Alvar. So the first three were born even before the coming in of Kali Yuga, right? So Pogai Buddha and Pei Alvars are the first three Alvars chronologically, right? They are called Buddha Alvars, means the first Alvars, right? And then the last Alvar chronologically is Tirumangai Alvar. The latest, these are the traditional dates, 2706 BCE for Tirumangai Alvar. But modern scholars assign it to the period between AD 200 and AD 800, right? So for a discussion about this, we can see S.K. Iyengar's Early History of Vaishnavism in South India, pages 4 to 13. And also the very famous source book by S.N. Dasgupta, who is a Bengali scholar, who wrote History of Indian Philosophy. And we have to look in there at volume 3, pages 64 to 65. Right. So they were great mystics deeply immersed in the divine experience. They have expressed their experience of God and his glory in the form of Tamil verses, which are collectively entitled the Nalayira, which means Ayira means 1,000, Nala means 4. So Nalayira means 4,000. Divya means divine. Divya Prabandham, Nalayira Divya Prabandham, the 4,000 divine hymns. These mystic outpourings contain rich philosophical and religious thoughts drawn from the Upanishads, Itihasas, and Puranas. They cover all the essential teachings of Vaishnavism and have thus contributed to the further development of Vaishnavism by Nathamuni, Alavandar, and Ramanuja, the three principal Vaishnava apostles, and by the later Vaishnavacharyas. So Nathamuni, Alavandar, and Ramanuja are called Muni Traya, the three Munis. Nathamuni, Yamuna Muni, and Ramanuja Muni. Right. So now, okay, so there's a chat here. So it's interesting that Agni is considered Tamagun. I've also heard that Agni is considered in the pantheon of God to be on quite a lower level. Yeah, well, there was a quotation from the Vedas that we discussed last time that says that Vishnu is the highest and Agni is the lowest. Agni acts like the postman of the gods to take all of the oblations from the fire to the different devatas. Yes, I've definitely read this. It's from the Vedas, right? It is said because he serves all the other gods. Correct, exactly. So now, of the 4,000 hymns contributed by different alwars, right? And now there's quite a long discussion here in the footnote. The names of the 12 alwars in the chronological order is accepted by tradition as 1. Pogai alwar, 2. Bhutid alwar, 3. Pei alwar, 4. Tirumalasai alwar, 5. Nam alwar, 6. Madurakkavi alwar, 7. Kulashekara alwar, 8. Peri alwar, 9. Andal was the only female alwar, lady alwar, and 10. Tondaradi Podi alwar, 11. Tirupan alwar, and 12. Tirumangai alwar. Tradition also maintains the view that they were all divine incarnations for the purpose of propagating the spiritual knowledge through the popular language, that is Tamil. For details regarding their biographies and the hymns written by them, see Guru Parampara Prabhavam, which is also called Ayurapadi, right, in Manipravala language by Pinpalakia Perumal Jia. See also Guru Parampara Prabhavam, Muvayirapadi, by Tritiya Brahma Tantra Parakala Swami. Right? Also see Divya Suri Charitam of Guru Devahana Pandita. Right? So these are all, those three last works are all hagiographical works of the lives of the Alwars. Right. So, continuing on. So the 4,000 hymns contributed by the different Alwars, right, varying in number. They vary in number, right? So 1,102 verses by Nam Alwar, which is called the Tiruvai Moli, is held in high esteem. That's considered to be equivalent. The Alwar's hymns by Sri Vaishnavas are considered to equal to they are called the Tamil Veda. And so they're equated to the Veda. And so this Tiruvai Moli, which is the greatest work of Nam Alwar, who is the head of the Alwars, in 1,102 verses, is considered to be equal to the Sama Veda, which is considered the most musical and the most beautiful of the Vedas in Sanskrit. So they regarded as the Dramida Upanishad. Dramida means the Dravida or Dramida means the South Indian Upanishad, or Tamil Veda, Tamil Marai, called Tamil Marai, because these contain the quintessence of the Upanishadic teachings. Its importance and popularity in the realm of Vaishnavism may be judged by the number of commentaries and sub-commentaries written on these hymns. They're very, very important. In fact, some of the Vaishnavacharyas after the 14th century have been so much attracted by the hymns of the Alwars that they have devoted greater attention to the teachings contained in the hymns and commentaries thereon in Manipravala language in preference to the Vedanta texts in Sanskrit. Ramanuja, though he did not write any commentary on the Tamil hymns, has definitely been influenced by their teachings. Under his direction, the very first commentary, known as the Arayirapadi, which means the 6,000 verses, means 6,000 verses. Ara means 6. Ayira means Arayira means the 6,000. So Arayirapadi means 6,000 verses. Commentary was written by his closest disciple named Pilan. The doctrines expounded in the Tamil hymns are: one, that Vishnu and Narayana associated with Shri, the goddess Lakshmi, his consort, his divine consort, is the Paratattva, supreme principle. Two, that bhakti or property are the means to attain moksha, that is, bhakti yoga, devotion and surrender are the means to liberation. Three, kainkarya, or service to God and to godly men, is an important duty of a true Vaishnava. Right? Four, moksha, or release from bondage, is the supreme goal. And the three principal tenets of Vishishtadvaita, Vedanta, which is the system of Ramanuja, right? That is tattva, or principles, right? Hita, or means, and purushartha, or goal, as presented in the Vedanta Sutra, are developed by Nam Alwar in the Tiruvaimoli. So Badarayana, who's written the Vedanta Sutras in 4 chapters, the first 2 chapters are about tattva, the third chapter is hita, and the 4th chapter is purushartha. Right. So the Vaishnavism, expounded by Ramanuja and his followers, are based on not only the teachings of the Upanishads, Vedanta Sutra, Bhagavad-Gita, and the Pancharatra treatises, but also on the teachings contained in these Tamil hymns of the Alvars. Hence, it is designated as Ubhaya Vedanta. The word Ubhaya means both. So we had before Ubhaya Lingatva, which meaning that the Supreme Lord is both male and female, Lakshmi and Narayana. Right, so here we have, well, the divine couple, but here we have Ubhaya Vedanta. There are 2 Vedantas. There's the Tamil Vedanta and the Sanskrit. There's a Sanskrit Vedanta in the Upanishads, which gives philosophy of Vedanta, and there's also the philosophy of the Alvars. So that is called Ubhaya Vedanta. So you'll hear many times people are being called Ubhaya Vedantins. And you'll see also that people put in front of their names, they put U dot Ve dot, which means Ubhaya Vedantin, right? So somebody would be Sri Rangacharya, Sri Ubhaya Uve Rangacharya, or whatever his name is, whatever the person's name is. From the brief outline of the historical development of Vaishnavism presented so far, it may be observed that the religion and philosophy of Vaishnavism has been prevalent since very ancient times, up to the period of Natamuni, Yamunacharya, and Ramanuja, the 3 eminent Vaishnavacharyas, who were, as its principal exponents, formulated it into a religious and philosophical system. There are 4 stages of development during this long period. First of all, there's the Vedic stage, the Vedic period. Then the post-Vedic period, where the Agamas were developed. Then the 3rd period is the period of the Itihasas and the Puranas. And the 4th period is the period when the Alvars lived and they wrote the Naradivi Prabandha. So I would not like to venture the dates of these periods for 2 reasons, right? One, the dates are under dispute between the traditional scholars and the modern scholars, because obviously the Vaishnava traditional scholars will have older dates and the modern scholars will have more modern dates. And we don't need to dispute the dates, because what we're more interested in is in the contents of the philosophy and the scriptures, rather than the dates of their being written. 2, they are not relevant for the purpose of presenting the philosophy and religion of Vaishnavism. The date is not relevant. Right. If we go by tradition, Vaishnavism has a divine origin. As in the first place, it was taught by Lord Vishnu to Brahma, and in turn to Sanat Kumara, etc. By taking the view of modern scholars, we may trace the origin to the Rig Veda. The period of the Rig Veda itself is disputable amongst scholars, ranging from about 5000 BCE to 600 BCE. And in the same way, the period of Mahabharata, according to some scholars, is 300 BCE. And for some, it is as far back as 3000 BCE, beginning with the present age of Kali Yuga. Namalwar was born, according to tradition, at the beginning of Kali Yuga. If this is accepted, we have to place the age of the Agamas, which have had a direct influence on the Alvars, and to which references are found in the Mahabharata as far back as 5000 BC. Right. All that is important to note for our purpose is that Vaishnavism has a long antiquity, even going to the basis of the Rig Veda, where we have noticed the hymns asserting the monotheistic religion of Vishnu. It is as old or older than the Rig Veda. So now there are also inscriptional evidence of the antiquity of Vaishnavism, apart from the textual evidence. So on the basis of inscriptional and internal textual evidence, we can also safely attribute considerable antiquity to Vaishnavism. An inscription found at Gosundi in Rajasthan, in North India, right? In northwest India, right? Mentions the construction of a wall around a hall of worship of Sankarshana and Vasudeva, the two important deities from the Agamas, right? Two parts of the Chaturvyuha, two expansions of the Lord, right? On epigraphical evidence, it is believed to have been engraved about 200 BC. So that quotation there is from a very common source book called Vaishnavism, Shaivism, and Minor Religions, other minor sects, right, by Bhandarkar, and that's in page 4 of that. In another inscription discovered in Besnagar, Heliodara, a native of Taxila and an ambassador of the Yavana, which Yavana means Greek in this sense, the Greek king of Taxila, erected a column with an image of Garuda, the bird mount of Vishnu, on the top, a Garudadwaja, right? So in honor of Vasudeva, the king of gods, right? So Garudadwaja means that the Lord Vishnu has a flag. His victory flag has got the symbol of Garuda, the golden eagle, on it, like that. So this ambassador from Greece erected a Garuda stamba, a column with Garuda on top of it, in honor of Lord Vishnu. He calls himself this Greek ambassador to India at the time. He calls himself a Bhagavata, so he called himself a Vaishnava. He was a Vaishnava. This inscription is considered to belong to the earlier part of the 2nd century before the Christian era, 2 centuries before Christ. At that time, Vasudeva must have been worshipped as the god of gods of the supreme being, and his worshippers were called Bhagavatas. In another inscription found in a cave in Nanagat in Maharashtra, which is also in Western India, right? The names of Sankarshana and Vasudeva as a compound word occur along with those of other deities in the opening invocation. This inscription appears to belong to the 1st century BCE. So we can also find that also in Bhandarkar's book, page 5. More important than this, we have the Panini Sutra. Now, Panini was a grammarian who was actually born in Kabul, as far as I know, in Afghanistan, which was all part of the Greater Bharata, or India, right? And Panini was the one who, in 4,000 sutras, he put forward the grammar of the Sanskrit language in a very, very exceptionally logical fashion, right? So in Panini Sutra 4.398 says, Vasudeva Arjunabhyam Ban, right? Makes mention of Vasudeva. So even in Panini Sutras, which are very ancient, Panini has mentioned Vasudeva. Vasudeva means the Supreme Lord Vishnu, Sriman Narayana. So Panini, the grammarian, belonged to a period long before the Christian era. Patanjali, who is the commentator on Patanjali's sutras, right, explains that Vasudeva in the sutra refers only to God, and it is not a name of a Kshatriya, right? So just in case somebody was saying Vasudeva means something else, right? Here, the commentator Patanjali explains that here Panini means in this sutra, Vasudeva, he's talking about the Supreme Person, God. All these evidences indicate that long before the inscriptions were written, the Bhagavata cult, with the belief in Vasudeva as the supreme being must have existed. The references to Vasudeva and Sankarsana indicate the prevalence of the Pancharatra system, since these names are of the Vyuha forms of Vishnu or Paravasudeva. The Bhagavata religion is not distinct from the Vaishnava religion, since the two deities, as has been explained earlier, refer to the same God. We will not be wrong in concluding that Vaishnavism, both according to tradition as well as historical evidences, is a very ancient religion going back to the pre-Christian era.
Om Namo Narayana